Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning. Hopefully, you can all hear and see me okay. Thank you very much for joining us at this Your Overseas Home webinar. Today, we are going to be talking all about moving to France with a focus around the France visa process. And we're very luckily joined by Fabien from Fab Expat Services, who I've had the pleasure of working and knowing over the last couple of years. And he's been a great help and support to all of our clients who are looking to undertake or have undertook similar journeys as what you're looking to do over in France. So Fabien, thank you for being here again. It's great to have you here with us. Do you mind just giving us a quick introduction to yourself, and then we'll pass back over to me for the next part of the webinar?
Sure, Seb. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Yeah, well, so I'm Fabien from Fab Expat. Looks a bit egocentric when I'm saying this now, but so yes, I've been running this business since 2015 and working with the overseas for like 3+ years now, I think, or something like that.
I think so, yeah, so 3 years.
The job is very simple. We help people, from English-speaking countries move to France, or even non-English-speaking countries, as long as you speak English. It's just that's the only language we speak. From visas to buying a vehicle to insurance, we have a lot of providers we work with and solutions. Kind of your immigration doctor or GP, okay? So that's how I describe myself. And my job personally, as the best on the planet, I have nothing to sell. I do consultations. So we have free consultations. That's the link we've displayed here. And for those who are a bit more in a hurry, we do offer VIP consultations, but that's pretty much all I do. So.
Thank you. And, thanks again for being here. It's great to have everyone listening in live. And I know there'll be people listening in on demand. But if you are seriously looking to or interested in looking to move across to France or purchase property in France, Fabien and the team at Fab really are one of the most important contacts you can probably make. So you're in the right place, and thanks for joining us. It's a massive undertaking to buy property in your home country, even more so overseas, and there are risks involved, and there's different rules, regulations, languages. And Fab Expat will be able to help navigate those for you, ensure that you are taking the right processes and you are protected within that buying journey. We've got around 30 minutes today to talk with Fabien and ask questions. So throughout the whole session, we really would like you to ask as many questions as possible. At the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you should see a questions tab. Feel free to drop as many questions in there as you'd like. Try and test Fabien on his knowledge, experience. I'm sure he'd be hopefully be able to answer as many of those questions as possible. If we don't get around to answering them all, we will pass your details and your questions across to the Fab team to follow up with after this session in a bit more detail and discuss your plans. So yeah, enough from me. If you want to test the questions tab and maybe check about where we maybe tell us where you're looking in France to see how it all works. And I can see there's already some questions coming in. So Fabien, we'll go straight into them. So I suppose a good place to start is what type of visas are there, and why would someone perhaps need a visa for buying a property or looking to live overseas in France?
Yeah, right. This is very often a question that pops up indeed. So first, important to know, you don't need a visa, you don't need a residency permit, you don't need anything to buy a French property, okay? So you could just be like a visitor or have actually no visa at all and buy a French property. If you do that, you just limited the bond to the what we call the 90 every 180 days rule, which works backwards, by the way. So like you look at one particular date, past 180 days, and you don't want to have been in the Schengen. It's not just France, by the way, in the Schengen area for more than 90 days. So if you've been 3 months in Spain, basically you cannot go to France, okay? So, but also you look past 180 days again. So if past 180 days you haven't been into the Schengen area or less than 90 days, well, then you do have an allowance. And again, this allowance is a moving allowance, because at every single day, if you look past 180 days, you have a 90 days allowance. And unless you exceed that 90 days allowance, you're allowed to be in the Schengen area with no visa. So that being said, a lot of people consider buying a property, or maybe have bought a property and want to live in France long term, or just to extend the time they can be in France over the 90 days limit. So there's a few options. For those who just want to be like second homeowners, there's two options. It's either a 6-month visa, which unfortunately is not a 6-month a year visa, but 6 months in a row. So you have to plan that ahead, but it does work and does allow you to extend the 90 days allowance. Or a more flexible option, but a bit more costly as well in terms of the requirements, doesn't really have a name. It's called the VLST, but it's the 6 to 12 month visa. So this one is, well, actually it could allow you to be the whole year in France. It's just non-renewable. But often if you do not want to become a tax resident, it's 6 months a year. And France works per calendar year, by the way. So, okay, it's from the 1st of January to the 31st of December. Mm-hmm. So, this is for second homeowners. And for those who want to potentially permanently relocate to France, whatever this is, for a couple of years or potentially forever, usually you're looking for something we call the VLSTS. And that's something that also is referred to as a 12 plus month visa. When you retire, for example, you're looking for a category that's called visitor. I know it sounds confusing, but it's a permanent visa. So it's a VLS visitor visa. So yeah, and if you want to give to use the full word, it's a VLS. It's a VLSTS 12 plus month visitor visa. It's quite a mouthful, but that means the same thing. Okay, it's all the same thing. The requirements are fairly simple. I keep on saying that, but well, there's a bunch of things, and obviously depending on the category of visa, I'm going for the non-working type of visa, which is the visitor one, because it's the simplest. But it always boils down to the same, I like to call them pillars, okay, the 3 pillars of a successful visa application. And those pillars are proof of income, proof of address, proof of medical coverage. So, well, proof of income, you need to meet France minimum wage. So passive income, or could be rental income, could be dividends, could be whatever. You do not need to have income though. You can also, and it's not and, okay? You do not need to have both. You can also use savings. And then if you're using savings, you just need 12 times the amount. Okay? So basically, I'm running up the numbers because you need to meet France minimum wage net, which is roughly 1,400 net a month. It's actually like 1,425, but okay, let's say roughly 1,400 net a month. Or 12 times this amount in savings, which is roughly 18,000 euros. Again, it's less than that, but I'm running up things. And it's completely fine to have that in a foreign currency. So if you have that in GBP, well, then you just have to run the math and match the figure in euro, because that's what they expect to see. But it's okay. Eventually, you do want to have a solution to pay in euros, because otherwise you'll keep on paying the bank's exchange fees. So you want to speak with your overseas, with smart currencies or brokers like that, so that you have a solution. But it is okay for visa and immigration purposes to use a GBP labeled bank account. Okay. Mm-hmm. The proof of address, you need to use either, well, if you bought a property, you can use this address, or if you have a French property, or a 1-year rental contract. And I cannot stress this enough. France is very specific about those contracts. It sounds scary. It's like quite the commitment, a 1-year contract. But in France, actually, the tenant is not committed at all on a 1-year contract. So why the name 1 year? Because the landlord, on the other hand, the landlord cannot expel the tenant for 1 year, hence the name in France. So it's completely reversed. But the tenant, on the other hand, can literally sign the contract, walk away the day after, 0 penalty. You do have to respect the notice, but the notice is, depending on the contract, is either 1 or 3 months. That's it. So a 1-year contract basically commits you to 1 or 3 months, the notice, but that's it. So it's another visa compliant option for the proof of address. And finally, the third option is if you know someone in France and they're happy with you using their address for legal purposes, obviously, it's called an attestation d'hébergement, and that's the third option you can use for the proof of address. That's visa compliant. Some consulates in some countries are a bit more flexible, but again, I like to insist, those 3 options I've mentioned are the only ones that are completely visa compliant. Everything else is a political tolerance or leeway that's being applied locally. For example, at the minute, for example, in the US, they could accept Airbnbs, but they would never accept that in the UK, for example.
Yeah.
There is probably a political aspect, but we won't get into that. But this is, it's just to understand what the pillars are theoretically, although practically it can change. And then the final pillar is the proof of medical coverage. This one is the simplest. You just have to buy an insurance policy. Well, we can help you with that. We have an insurance branch dedicated to that. We have the cheapest policy on the market. It's as easy as that. It's as easy as buying the policy, okay? So.
Perfect. Fabien, thank you. So, yeah, you make it sound very straightforward and simple. And I know it is to a certain extent, and it's ensuring that those pillars, as you said, are met, and then everything goes through smoothly. We've got quite a few questions coming through around the potential requirements, as you mentioned there. We've got a question here from Mark, talking around if Mark was going through a property purchase over in France, can that property address be used in the visa if that property purchase isn't yet completed? And if no, Mark asks, is there, if the property is purchased, is there sufficient time to then make the application within 90 days?
Very good question. Very, very good. Because there's a lot of things actually that are implied in there. So first, no, unfortunately, you have to see the process through so that property can be used as the proof of address. So there's a document when you sign. Well, there's a few options available, but I'll try not to lose you and bombard you. But usually when you sign on a French property, you sign something called a compromis de vente. Okay. It triggers a process. It depends also if you're a cash buyer, if you have to get a mortgage. So it's like a 6 to 12 weeks process. But it's only at the end of the process that you sign, like you would say, you exchange contracts with the sellers. And so you get something called the acte de vente. And the all of that is overseen by a very specific French guy, which is called a notary, a French notary. And that's only the notary who deals with that. And the notary will only do that once everything is settled. Okay, the contract. So the property has been paid. He will escrow the funds and stuff. It's very secure. But it's only once he give you a document called the acte de vente authentique that you can use. So with that document, you can use for visa purposes. So how should I do in the meantime if I want to move to France earlier? Well, there's basically 2 options. Either you reach out to and actually, by the way, this is something we can help you with, by the way, guys. This is something we do quite often as part of the concierge service. So you can reach out to the seller so that they write you a rental contract, which would expire when you take over the property, but then the rental contract can be used for visa purposes. Okay, and it shows ultimate commitment to the sellers, so they're very often happy to do that. Or, but that's a bit more of a commitment. So this one, they're a bit more reluctant. It depends on the relationship you have with the seller. But they can also do the attestation d'hébergement, the third option I mentioned. So this is an option to fast track. Otherwise, you can move to France earlier. And like you were saying, option 2, is there enough time? So the visa process is the 30 to 90 days process. Actually, 4 to 6 weeks is pretty much always the kind of time frame you should expect. However, there's something not to be overlooked. It does involve an in-person interview in your home country, the country you're applying from. So if it's the UK, it's not that far. You need to do a round trip back to the UK. If it's the US, for example, it might be a bit further away. And during this interview, they'll keep your passport because the visa is a new page. Well, there's a sticker on the visa pages on your passport. So without a passport, then you won't be able to get back or come back to France until they send the passport back with the visa in it, which typically happens within a couple of weeks. But you're stuck there for often a couple of weeks. So that is something to be factored in. Okay, so it should answer on both parts of the questions.
Just on that note, I know you mentioned there about the in-person interview. Where does that happen, and who does that actually happen with?
Well, actually, it's fairly standard now. France and the UK have the same provider. They've changed the provider in the US and the UK. They've changed the provider in the US recently. So it's both with a subcontractor. Well, technically, you're dealing with the French consulate. It's an online portal. You start with the application and stuff, but then you send to a French subcontractor, which is called TLS. Okay, TLS Contact. So both in the UK and the US is the same provider now. And well, it depends in which country you are in. There's quite a few visa, so I like to call them visa centers. There's quite a few visa centers. There are 3 in the UK. There's a bunch in the US, pretty much a lot on the East Coast and West Coast, and then Texas in the middle, and then Georgia. But they're pretty much all across, not in central states, unfortunately, apart from Illinois. Yeah. But you need to physically go there. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, great. No, that's really useful to know. And I know there's quite a few questions coming in. We'll try and get around to as many of them as we can.
I've seen a question from Marina. I think is interesting to address, because she was asking, Brexit, France imposed higher rate on British citizens owning second homes. No. Actually, and that's what's fabulous for me with France is that expats and natives are treated, I would say, exactly the same. Actually, if anything, we've tried to get some bills that were favorable to the Brits, and they were denied because it would have been discriminatory to the non-British expats who wanted to buy in France. So no, but the new things you might have seen is not a new tax, or if it is, it's nationwide. It's not just for the Brits, but it's when you're a second homeowner in France, you pay an extra tax. But I mean, I would as well. Okay. So like there is the property tax, which is the taxe foncière. And by the way, when you're buying a property, it's completely fine. I mean, I would do that. Like you ask the seller, how much are you paying property tax? Because I'll be taking over paying the same thing. But then if this is a second home, there is a second thing called the taxe d'habitation. And unless you're buying from someone who is already paying that, well, then you'll find out it's usually like kind of half the price of the property tax, but to be taken with a pinch of salt, because this is discretionary to the city hall, so they can, the rules might vary. Typically, it's half the price of the property tax.
Okay, really, that's useful. I didn't actually know that. Fab, it's a great question as well coming through. We'll go back, Fab, just around the requirements. Helen has asked a quite good question here around the proof of income. I know a lot of our listeners may be looking to move across to France as a family or with their partners. When it comes down to visas, first of all, is it one application for a family or a partner? But also, if you are applying as multiple people, is that income requirement per person, or is it kind of inclusive for the whole party?
Good. Okay. Yeah, all good questions. So it's one application per adult. Okay, so even children, but if they are, well, actually anyone over 16. Children under 16 can be filed under the parent or parents application. So and then in regard, so that should answer the question about that. And in regard to how much income they require. So this one, typically French, there's the theoretical and the practical framework. So theoretically, you need to have the income requirement met for each adult, and then 15% per dependent, so child. So 15% extra, so minimum wage times 15%, and that's what you need on top per child. Okay. But that's theoretical, because practically, I'd say the more people there is in the family, the more they kind of apply like a family discount, if you like. But this is an unwritten rule. So, for example, you're supposed to be making basically 2,800 net a month as a couple combined. But in the UK, I've seen as low as 2,000 being accepted. Okay. But this is not the kind of rule they will disclose. This is, again, you have to remember, this is also a political tool, visas, So well, if you're from a friendly country, they may not apply things exactly by the book. They may give a bit of a leeway. But also, if your file is very clunky and, well, they'll take any uncompliant or non-compliant item in there to kind of support the rejection. So that's why I'm saying, ideally, you want to meet the theoretical requirements. but practically they're going to apply a discount. Yeah. Ellen also asked, and it's actually it combined with the questions already asked. The visa is indeed just the doorway into France, because, well, saying it is, when you get into residency, it becomes also a bit of a discretionary process. So I'll give you what's the thing we see the most, okay, to be taken with buckets of salt, because it's, again, very discretionary. It depends on where in France, when you apply, it depends on a lot of factors. But usually the way it goes is you start with a 1-year visa, and then from France, you renew your visa. I hate this term because it's so confusing. You apply for a residence permit. You don't renew anything. You apply for a residence permit with the prefecture in France, your local prefecture. And it's going to be a 1-year permit. So you're 2 years into your relocation. And then you'll renew your permits 1 year at a time, usually 1 year at a time, until, and that's the discretionary part, the prefecture thinks your situation is stable enough. Okay. And at this stage, they'll give you probably a 5 years permit. It could be less, but probably a 5 years permit, a multi-years permit, which is going to be a one-off leading into a 10 years permit. But you might have heard after 5 years, they can get a permanent permit. Yes. If you've been around for more than 5 years, you can yourself decide to apply for a 10 years permit, which might be accepted. And then you get a 10 years permit, who might not be accepted. And then, they revert back to a 1 year permit. They really do have discretionary powers. But I've given you the usual time frame, okay, which is basically it takes kind of 4 years to get a 5 years permit, and then a 10 years permit, which is called permanent.
Just in that note, Fabien, say, Helen, really good question there around renewing after the end of the visas. Kevin's asked here that Kevin's interested in pursuing potential citizenship or a French passport, and would move across permanently next year as retirees from the US. So very jealous of your plans, Kevin. He asked Fabien if you could maybe outline the process, but also is applying for citizenship in France, is that a straightforward process, and how long could it take for Kevin and his partner?
So yes, it's a question that comes out very often these days as well. So just to clear that out, so citizenship is never mandatory. It becomes an option, okay, a string that you can pull once you've been for more than 4 years. So once you've been in France for 5 years or more, you can apply for French citizenship, okay, and get a French passport, basically. So this is the criteria. It has nothing to do with immigration, okay. So well, unless you're married to a French citizen, there is also citizenship through marriage. This is a different option. But for guys who have no ties with France, you move to France, you live there for 5 years, so 4+ years continuously. That's very important, though. There's a break in there. It restarts the counter, unfortunately. But once you've lived in there, so on your 5th year, you can apply for citizenship. So there is a French test. Oh, by the way, there's a lot of fear-mongering around that. Don't know why, but unless on very specific situations, there's no French test on residence permit or visas, okay? There is a French test on citizenship, but again, because it's not mandatory, you would decide to apply for that. You could stay on residence permit forever, literally forever, because at some point they'll give you the 10 years permit, which is like a passport, and you just renew that every 10 years. But there's no more criteria of income and stuff. The criteria are going to be checked every year for residency until you get to that 10 years permit. But at the 10 years permit, they no longer check for proof of income and stuff like this. So back to citizenship, there is a civic test and there is a French test. So the level is B2, which is advanced. It's not fluent. Fluent would be C something, C1 or C2. But still, it's B2, so it's not that easy. So you need to have some sort of French fluency. And there is a civic test that, honestly, I think I'd fail. Although they give you a booklet where you know what to study. And even if you fail it, very often you can reapply in 6 months' time. And I've seen a lot of citizenship applicants who failed because of the civic test on the first trial, and who succeeded on the second time around, because now they know what to expect. They knew what to expect. And don't be afraid about that, because I've seen a lot of applicants like nailing the test and getting citizenship straight from the first try. But I'm just saying, in case you fail, very often the second time around you do get it. So it's not that difficult. But well, some of those questions are political or in relation to actually the news that's going on in France at the minute. So you have to be. So it's not mandatory, but it becomes an option after 5 years. Well, on your 5th years.
Brilliant. Thanks, Fabien. And great question, Kevin. It sounds very doable. You're just gonna have to be touchy up on your French before next year. So yeah, that's great. So we'll move on to a question we've got here from Christine, Fabien. So it's a question we get quite frequently, sorry, I should say, for clients that are looking to purchase it in Europe, is around a partner perhaps having an Irish passport when one of them doesn't and one of them does. Does that make a difference in regards to applying for visas? Do they still need to do that? You know, how does that Irish passport change things?
Well, I don't know who's the spouse, but she is due a very large pint of beer and a good meal, because it's definitely a massive benefit. Well, basically, you fall in the category that we call, well, you need to be married though, but you fall in the category that is called the spouse of an EU citizen. Okay. And well, being the spouse of an EU citizen, you don't need a visa at all. You can actually go to France, move to France directly without a visa, and then apply for the residency permit within the first 90 days of your relocation. So basically, you fast tracking into residency. And can apply for residency directly. However, you need to do that within 90 days. Okay, so you're a bit in a hurry, but you don't need a visa. So it's great. Just because it makes me laugh, you would think, yes, so if I'm the spouse of a French citizen, same thing, it's going to be great. Unfortunately, it would have been too simple. Spouse of a French citizen, they do need a visa.
Brilliant. Fabien, great. It's Christine. It sounds like you've got you've got a golden ticket, and so does your husband. So he owes you a pint of Guinness for that Irish passport.
Go for a couple. I think
at least a couple, yeah, for sure. We've got a question here from Andrew around costings, and I know it's really probably quite difficult, Fabien, to give an accurate cost on how much it is to apply for a visa, but also medical insurance.
No, ballpark figures. Yeah. So the visa is very simple. It's basically 100 euros per applicant. Okay. Well, again, adults, because minors, they do not need to attend the interview. So, and again, it needs to be one application each. So it could be one after another. Okay. But even husband and wife is going to be one after another. Okay. It's going to be 2 applications. So cross-referencing each other, but still 2 applications. So 100 euros for the in-person interview, and then like a 200 euros activation fee in France. So we could say roughly 300 euros. Obviously, I'm not considering, the move, the plane or train ticket or whatever. So obviously there's everything in regard to the physical relocation itself. But we're talking about the process here. Insurance is very often by far and large the most expensive part of this administrative journey. Just to give you, again, a ballpark idea, late 50s is going to be something like 2,000 per person for 1 year coverage. Like maybe 2,500 in your early 60s, something like that. So again, ballpark figures, just so you can imagine, could be much more expensive. Could hardly be cheaper though, for the first year. But the good news as well is you can enter French healthcare very often completely for free within the first year. And then you can top it up using something we call the mutuelle. Literally 99% of French citizens or residents would have the mutuelle. So everyone has that. And then you can basically divide those figures very often at least by 2, sometimes even by 3. Okay. Wow. So the private medical coverage is only required for the first year. And then very quickly, basically, you'll move on to the mutuelle, and that's going to be much cheaper.
Yeah. No, thank you. That's really clear, Fabien. I think that was going to be one of my questions: is does that healthcare insurance policy need to be renewed? And it sounds like it is probably the more costly part of the process. So it's great to hear that you can then apply for more affordable policies over there in France. Just while we're on the topic of healthcare, Michelle has got a question here around proof of medical coverage. Michelle asks, must it be a French policy, or can proof of medical coverage, perhaps in the US, with an international element, meet the requirement for a visa?
Yeah. So, well, it could be either. So it doesn't need to be a French policy. However, there is, again, to be visa compliant, there is a strict framework that it needs to respect. Very often, foreign policies aren't technically visa compliant. Again, depending on where you apply, they may be more or less flexible. I'm giving the theoretical requirements so that you're 100% certain it's going to be compliant. So theoretically, for a policy to be compliant, it needs to include in and outpatient benefits and repatriation, and comes with no excess or deductible. That last element very often is lacking, because very often you do have an excess or a deductible, obviously. And that's also one of the reasons why those policies are so expensive, because then you have, like, again, a no excess or no deductible policy. By definition, it increases the premium.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, I know there's lots and lots of insurance policies out there. I think one of some of the
Yeah,
go
sorry
ahead,
to interrupt. Just made me think of something. It's like kind of it's not a scam, but it is like a trick that I see a lot of people use, and this is something I'm fighting quite heavily. Make sure when you buy a policy, or when you have a policy, that you're covered in France. This is if you remember just one thing, it is that make sure you're covered as a French resident, not as a tourist, because otherwise, in case there's a big claim, it's going to be denied. I've seen that over and over again, unfortunately. So I'm not saying buy a policy or policies, but make sure you're insured as a French resident. So the pro tip is make sure you give the French address, not a US address or a UK address. Make sure you use a French address, because if they do not want, or make sure that the advisor is aware you're going to be a French resident, and make them say to you, yes, you will be covered as a French resident. I'm saying again, because otherwise they'll sell you travel insurance, and then it's almost certain you won't be covered.
It's a really, really great point, and I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. There's a lot to think about when you're buying a property or looking to move overseas, and something like the visas. You have to ensure that everything is compliant or done by the rules set out by that country. And something like the insurance, that's a small print where you may, if you're looking to it yourself, overlook it, and then it has some potential financial repercussions, but also delays to your plans in France. And one of the things I was going to say, Fabien, is I know from the feedback we've had from clients that have been working with you, undertaking similar journeys, is you offer that whole package to make sure that the visa is compliant, the healthcare is compliant, everything is there for the client, given what they're looking to do. So yeah, really important point there to highlight. Fabien, I know we've gone slightly over. Are you okay? We've got quite a few questions here. Are you okay to stay on and get through as many of these as we can?
Well,
I know you're an hour ahead over in France as well, so appreciate you hanging around. We had a really good question here that came through. Is around gîtes, but also potentially working in France, from Louise. So Louise is looking to buy a house in France as their main residence, but also have perhaps a gîte there with that rent out for holidays and things like that. So would someone in that position need a working visa, or is there a different type of visa for someone that's looking for those sort of gîtes or working in France?
Oh yeah, a very, very common question, very good as well, because this is one of those cases where it's an exemption or exception. So first, just to clear that out, you need to apply for the visa in your home country, okay? It's an online process, so you could start it from France if you like, but again, there is an in-person interview in your home country that's going to be required. So technically, practically, let's say you need to apply from your home country. Most people, especially if you look to retire, move to France permanently, would maybe retire or have a property there and will run that as a gîte business or some sort of a holiday rentals or something like that. And think, okay, well, this is a business because that's one of the source of income. Yes, but unless you exceed 23,000 euros of like yearly turnover through that business, you do not need a business visa, and it is not going to be seen as a business. There is a specific section on French tax returns that we call LMNP, which means loueur meublé non professionnel, which is literally furnished rentals, non-professional. And that's, as it's non-professional, it is exempt from having a business type of visa. So you do not need to have a business type of visa.
Okay, Brilliant, perfect. I think you know there's a lot of different types of visa, and you know, the point of these discussions are to kind of highlight that everyone has unique requirements, and it's really important that you take the time to have a conversation around what you're looking to do, because there are different options, and some may be a good fit for you, and others may not. So, you know, it is a bit of a minefield, but you put it very simply earlier, and I think that the free
and that's why we offer the free consultations, you know, or paid, but like, you know, if you want to fast track this, but so we're more than happy to help you navigate the minefield.
Yeah, absolutely. And just while we're on that topic, for everyone listening in, you should hopefully see the QR code on the screen. If you just scan that with your camera, you'll go through and be able to book a free consultation with Fabien and the team. And why not, you know, if you're looking to buy in France, have that conversation and let them explain how they can help you. I mean, one of the questions that we get quite frequently, people listening in here, maybe some months or potentially years away from looking to buy in France or live in France. When it comes down to visas, you mentioned earlier, it can take 30 to 90 days to be applying and be approved. When is a good time to have this conversation? And normally, when is a good time to apply? But also, is there like a time limit for you to actually use and exercise that visa?
Well, again, first, depending on when in the year, it's going to be more or less busy. So, well, there's also a political aspect. There might be the news, what's going on in the world at that minute, but at the moment. But on average, following, you know, I've been doing this again for 10 years. So well, on average, usually early, you know, like, well, February, March, April is quite slow. Same for October, November. Summer times are quite busy. So the waiting times and the processing times tend to be longer. So in the US, but again, if I need to kind of sum it up, in the US, it's quite often like a week to the turnover, and it's going to be like a couple of weeks in the UK. Again, this is the average. It may vary plus or minus 1 week. Okay.
Okay, brilliant.
That's a question, but
yeah, no, I mean, it does. It said, I know everyone has different requirements, but also different time frames, and it's you know, when do you have that conversation? When do you start actually getting the wheels in motion and start applying? But also what you especially need to do.
You're right. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. I will look that. Yeah. So ideally, well, I would say honestly, for me, the best time frame is when you are like 3 months prior to the date you want to move. That's because everything can be done, and you have sufficient time to get it done without being rushed. And if you can, try to not do that when you are like less than 2 months. I mean, it can be done in 6 weeks. I mean, if you're really in a rush, 4 weeks is the bare minimum, legally speaking. So I would not advise you do that in a month. But ideally, like 2 to 3 months ahead, it is brilliant, because then you have enough time to do things properly. But the earlier the better, obviously, because you're never really too early. It's just, yes, you're too early, so then it's going to wait. We're going to put some things in the back burner until you're within the time frame of the application. But you can start the application pretty much as early as you want. It's just that you won't be able to book the in-person interview unless you're within 90 days of the intended arrival date. That's why we often say, okay, well, when you're within 90 days, it gets real.
Sure. Okay, no, that's clear. Thanks, Fabien. And just on that, we've got a question that came through from Jutta around how long is the visa valid until you arrive? So when that visa is approved, does it start straight away, or is it kind of when you actually get there? How does it work?
It's very often a misconception about that as well. So you decide, okay? You decide on your application, you lay down a date, which is, again, the intended arrival date, which is going to be the visa start date. Okay, if it's accepted, they're going to match your date. So you would have chosen that. And so once you're in France, again, the visa will be valid for 1 year. You can, so let's say you decided on the visa start date 1st of January 2026. So you need to show up physically within 90 days as well, always 90 days. So you need to show up within 90 days because you need to physically be there in order to activate your visa. It needs to be activated. This is the 200 euros I've mentioned, activation fee you need to pay afterwards. And because also following the activation of the visa, they'll offer an in-person interview, which by the way is not a test. You cannot fail it. It's a free medical exam. Well, free, you have to pay 200 euros. But then when you apply for residency, they ask for the receipt of you attending these medical exams. So you know, it's all kind of intertwined. And so that's why you need to have been around in the first 90 days. So yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense. So Justin, thanks for the question, and yeah, thanks to everyone else for your questions. I know we've got quite a few that we haven't got around to. What we'll do at the beginning of this webinar, we'll send those questions across to Fabien for him and the team to follow up with you. You know, we do really recommend that you scan that QR code, have that conversation with him and the team. You can answer as many of your questions and explain your unique requirements and in detail to you. So yeah, it's still up there now. We have gone over time, Fabien, and so you know, thanks again for you being here. You've been great as always, and I really appreciate all the assistance and support that you've offered throughout this, but also, you know, over the years working with you. For everyone listening in, you know, best of luck with your plans over in France, your overseas home, and Fabien will be here if you need us, and happy to support you with any questions or requirements that you have, not just on visas, but with estate agents, you know, mortgages, you need mortgage and foreign exchange, so on and so forth. So anything we can do, please reach out to us. On the bottom of your screen, there should be a pop-up that comes up fairly soon to leave us a review on Trustpilot. So if you found this webinar useful, we'd really appreciate a nice review. I know it'll go down well with my bosses here, so I really appreciate that, and I'm sure it's the same over with Fabien. So if you could leave us a review, that'd be great. And also, we will be having future webinars around buying in France or moving to France coming up, alongside our virtual event in October, on October the 4th of this year, where you should be able to register for on another link that pops up. But thanks for being here. And Fabien, thanks to you again. Really appreciate time, and it's great talking with you. And we'll catch up again a bit later on.
Thank you, everyone. Fabien. Thank you, Seb, for having me. Thank you, everyone, for the questions.
Cheers, Fabien. All the best. We'll speak soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.